Welcome back, sixth graders. We're going to get started on our next chapter, which is called the common good. What is the common good? It is the belief that people should work for social and political change that benefits everyone. So, for example, is there a problem today that you see needs solving? Some problems we can solve by ourselves, say your room, maybe, and other problems are solved by group effort or maybe our government. For example, our government might solve a problem by using its military. But when should a government step in to help solve a problem? That is an ongoing argument from a long time ago and even fiercely debated today. And this chapter shows examples of individuals, groups, and government solving problems, particularly in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So here are some common good topics. One is the progressive movement. And this is a movement to solve various social, economic, political problems through government action. Could be voting rights, it could be pollution, could be various corruption. And then we're going to learn about reformers. A reformer is a person who works for changes they believe will improve society. For example, Teddy Roosevelt, former president. Now, Roosevelt believed in the square deal, meaning he thought the government shouldn't favor the rich or the poor. And at his time, government or the society kind of favored the power of the wealthy. And Roosevelt's championed food safety, ending monopolies, setting aside land for parks, enjoyment, so forth. So those are some ways that he was a reformer. Another topic is government corruption, which is dishonest or illegal dealings in the government. Suffrage, especially women's right to vote. Now, they didn't get the right to vote till 100 years ago across our nation. Monopolies. Now, you're familiar with the game. This image of this character in Monopoly is argued to be copied after Rockefeller from the early 1900s, who owned Standard Oil, a billionaire at the time, who eventually his company was broken up because he had so much power, there was no way other oil companies could compete against him. More recently, Bill Gates' company Microsoft was regulated in the 2000s because of its monopoly. There's a railroad monopoly or concern because James J. Hill, Minnesota guy, was trying to merge his railroad with two other major railroads, and then he would control most of the railroad traffic in the northwest part of the country, which definitely impacts prices that people pay. Another issue were logging issues in Minnesota because a number of towns were burned down. There were forest fires. It was particularly due to logging practices where tree parts were left and scattered across Minnesota. Health dangers was a concern. So disease was an increasing concern 100 years ago. There were densely populated cities with crowded living conditions. Diseases spread quickly. Streets were filthy with horse manure. There were dead animals and sewage that was sent into the Mississippi River where people got their drinking water. So diseases and health concerns were becoming a national awareness. Other health dangers, learning about sanitation, clean drinking water, safe disposal of sewage was the topic, and quarantining of patients with smallpox, diphtheria, and starting of vaccinations. Sound familiar? And making packaged foods safer to eat, because people were sometimes getting ingredients in their food that they weren't expecting that were kind of dangerous. So the government started regulating that. Discrimination and unfair treatment of a person or group based on race, sexual orientation, gender, religion, or ethnic background. Assimilation, forcing a group of people to give up their culture in favor of another group's culture. For example, Ojibwe were forced to give up their culture. One way they were forced to do this was their children were forced to go to boarding schools, living far away from their family. Their land was allotted, which means that it was divided up and Europeans were able to take it. Another thing that we'll be learning about is how there's Americanizing of immigrants. So these are topics in the progressive movement, including learning about typhoid fever, smallpox, germs, and vaccinations. So can you think of a problem that needs to be solved for the common good? That's what you are going to learn about today.